Hello everyone and welcome to the fourth episode of Point of View of 1530. Today we are going to review the game between Jawoke Sindarov and Fabiano Caruana. Sindarov played with white pieces, Caruana played with black. Alright, let's start the game. White started with pawn to d4, pawn to d5, c4, e6, knight f3, pawn takes pawn, e3. So Queen's Gambit accepted variation is on the board. Knight to f6, bishop takes c4, pawn to c5, castle, knight to c6, queen to e2, pawn a6. Black must be trying to play pawn to b5 in order to attack the bishop on c4, and when the bishop goes back, black is trying to develop the bishop on b7. Knight to c3, pawn to b5, bishop d3 and bishop b7. Pawn a4, b4 attacking the knight. Now knight has e4 square, knight can also move to d1, but d1 has no scope afterwards, so knight to e4. Knight a5, probably to push the pawn to c4, but right now they don't have enough support, and bishop has revealed the attack on e4 knight. So now the e4 square has two attackers. White must defend the e4 knight. Okay, so knight takes knight and pawn takes knight. A bold decision by Caruana. Now both sides of black are exposed. So black king must remain in the center for the sake of safety. Pawn takes pawn and knight to b3 attacking the a1 rook and the c5 pawn. Pawn to c6, brilliant move by Sindarov. So he's trying to give up the rook on a1. Of course the c6 pawn is free as well, but what seems to be the idea behind this? Let's take the pause and see through. What happens if knight takes rook? Pawn takes bishop will happen. Look, let's say rook moves to b8. After that, okay, so there is a possibility of bishop takes a6. So the b7 pawn is going to stay there for a long time, and the queen can come to b5, there are checks, the rook can come to d1, so lot can happen. Pawn to c6 has been played, bishop takes pawn, Caruana obviously doesn't take the rook, and knight to d4. Another brilliant move, giving up the rook again. If black takes the rook, then white will capture the bishop on c6 and then capture the pawn on a6. Let's see what happens if black tries to capture the a1 rook. Now knight takes c6, queen is attacked, so queen must protect itself, queen b6, and then you can play knight to d4. Coming back to the square. What seems to be the idea of white? White can play rook d1, the king is safe, and the knight is trapped. Okay, so in exchange of two pieces, white lost a rook, which seems to be a fair deal to me. Alright, coming back, white played knight to d4 and knight exchanges knight, pawn takes knight, rook to g8. Caruana goes for the kill. Now white king under the danger. Pawn to g3, saved. Pawn to f5. Okay, cut. White plays bishop to c4, rook to g4, bishop e3, bishop to d5, trying to attack the c4 bishop. What happens if white takes the a6 pawn? Isn't that free? Maybe queen a5, something like this. Also, I sense queen h4 is there. Queen h4 and stuff like this. Okay, so black also has lot of threats in their mind, yeah. Queen h4, bishop to d6. So the bishop is eyeing here, this bishop will be eyeing here, the pawn. Alright. So after bishop d5, white continued with rook to c1, rook a7. Bishop e7 has happened, okay. Bishop takes a6, the pawn has been captured. King moves to f8. Black does not want the queen b5 check, so king moves to f8 and bishop b5, controlling the e8 square. Bishop to f6, attacking the d4 pawn. Right now it has only one support of the bishop on e3. So white brings in another support, rook f d1, king to g7. Slowly Caruana's king marches towards the safety. Bishop to c6, rook to a5. Now black wants to support the bishop on d5 with the help of rook on a5. Bishop takes bishop and rook takes bishop. Rook c5. Now we cannot exchange the rook because pawn will capture and then rook will be attacking the black queen. So rook goes back to d7 and pawn to d5. Progressing the pawn ahead. Now white already has a edge because the pawn on a4 is a passer. The pawn on d5 is going to prove to be a break for the situation. As it happens, e takes d5, queen to f3, attacking the pawn thrice now. Bishop takes b2, a free pawn, but rook takes d5. Already the d file is being dominated by white, and now black plays rook takes rook, rook takes rook, and queen to e8, attacking the a4 pawn. Rook takes f5. Now if queen tries to capture the a4 pawn, the white rook will capture the f7 pawn. The black rook goes back to g6, pawn to h4, bishop to c3, pawn to h5. Now queen g4 check, king moves to h8. Alright, so now we have a bishop to d4 check. So bishop takes bishop, queen takes bishop, check, king can move here, and maybe a rook g5 check can happen. And then king has to move to f8, something like, yeah, correct. So that's what has happened apparently. Bishop to d4 check, pawn blocks it, and rook to c5. Rook c8 pins the queen on d8, and that's pretty much game over for black. Alright, so great game by Kshitij Sindarov. Now he is the sole leader of the tournament. We'll see you in the round 5. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this, please like, share and subscribe.